Chosen one. What if the frustration, confusion, and silence you've been experiencing are not signs that you're being forgotten, but signs that something is finally shifting? Because nobody talks about this part. Nobody tells you that spiritual breakthrough doesn't always feel powerful. Sometimes it feels like exhaustion, like losing interest in everything, like doors closing, like prayers being answered with silence. And if you're in that place right now, this message may explain something you've been trying to understand for a long time. Because what if the pressure you've been under was never meant to break you, but to reveal a version of you that could not emerge any other way? Stay until the end, because one of the signs of breakthrough is happening quietly, and there's a chance you've mistaken it for failure. Chosen one. This message is for the person who almost gave up, right before everything begins to change. Because the truth is, the beginning of spiritual breakthrough rarely looks the way people imagine, and the first stage is the one nobody prepares you for. The silent season nobody warned you about. There is something nobody tells you about spiritual breakthrough. Nobody tells you that before things begin opening, they often become strangely quiet. Nobody tells you that right before life changes, it can feel like nothing is changing at all. You expected lightning. You expected instant answers. You expected a moment where heaven suddenly announces itself. You expected clarity. You expected confirmation. You expected movement you could point to and say, "This is it." But breakthrough rarely enters like noise. More often, it enters through silence. And that silence can become dangerous if you misunderstand it. Because silence makes people assume abandonment. Silence makes people question themselves. Silence makes people think they missed their moment. Silence makes people wonder if they prayed incorrectly, if they waited too long, if they were overlooked, if somehow everyone else was moving forward while they remained behind. But what if this season is not evidence that God stepped away? What if this season is preparation? What if the silence is not absence, but attention? There are seasons where nothing appears to move externally, while everything is being rebuilt internally. And internal rebuilding is difficult to trust because you cannot measure it, you cannot post it, you cannot prove it, you cannot show people the invisible work happening inside your spirit. You pray, you wait, you become frustrated, you wonder why old doors closed, you wonder why certain people disappeared, you wonder why your emotions feel unfamiliar, you wonder why things that once excited you suddenly feel empty. You wonder why your old ambitions no longer fit. And what nobody tells you is that breakthrough often starts by removing the structures that can no longer carry where you're going. Before expansion, there is clearing. Before elevation, there is separation. Before a new chapter, there is often a quiet ending nobody notices. That process feels uncomfortable because your identity begins separating from what once made you feel secure. You stop needing approval. You stop chasing attention. You stop forcing outcomes. You stop trying to convince people to understand you. You stop measuring your value through results. And suddenly, life feels empty. But it is not empty. It is making room, because sometimes what feels like emptiness is actually space. Space for clarity, space for healing, space for direction, space for a version of yourself that could never emerge while everything remained crowded. Chosen one. You are not losing yourself. You are becoming difficult to recognize because transformation changes the person who enters the next season, and that can feel lonely. Because people often celebrate visible success, but rarely understand invisible growth. Nobody applauds restraint. Nobody applauds internal healing. Nobody applauds the days you kept going quietly. But heaven sees what people overlook. This is why many people quit too early. They interpret the silence as rejection. But silence is often construction. You cannot hear roots growing. You cannot hear healing happening. You cannot hear old patterns dissolving. You cannot hear confidence rebuilding. You cannot hear emotional strength forming. Yet all of it is happening. The strongest transformations usually happen underground, before anything appears above the surface. And breakthrough does not begin when circumstances change. Breakthrough begins when your internal world stops depending on circumstances. Because the greatest prison is not lack. It is believing nothing is happening. There are things being arranged you cannot yet see. Conversations, timing, character, wisdom, discernment, strength, new perspective, emotional endurance, the ability to carry what you once prayed for. You think heaven forgot you. Meanwhile, your foundation is being reinforced. You think life has paused. Meanwhile, you are becoming capable of sustaining what is coming. Chosen one, stop measuring spiritual progress by visible movement. Some of your greatest growth happened in seasons nobody applauded. Some of your greatest victories happened privately. This is the hidden beginning. This is the quiet preparation. This is the part nobody celebrates. But this is often where breakthrough truly starts. And yet, there's another part nobody warns you about. Because after the silence, after the internal rebuilding, after the clearing begins, breakthrough still doesn't always feel like winning. Sometimes, it feels like losing first. Things stop working, plans collapse, people misunderstand you, old ambitions lose meaning, and for a moment, you think you are going backward. You begin asking questions you never expected to ask. Why is this becoming harder? Why am I losing interest? Why does it feel like everything is changing at once? You expected breakthrough to feel like momentum. Instead, it feels like interruption. You expected confirmation. Instead, you received uncertainty. And because nobody explains this part, many people leave the process too early. They assume that discomfort means they made a wrong turn. But spiritual breakthrough has a strange pattern. Before something expands, something must release. Before something grows, something becomes too small. Before something new appears, something old loses its power. And that transition can feel painful. Not because you are failing, but because growth changes your relationship with what once felt familiar. You cannot carry old identities into new assignments. You cannot receive new vision while protecting old comfort. You cannot ask for transformation while negotiating with the habits that kept you small. Yet most people fight this process. They hold on to expired seasons because familiarity feels safer than uncertainty. Even pain can become familiar. Even limitation can become comfortable. Even old patterns can begin to feel like identity. And that resistance creates suffering. Not because transformation is cruel, but because growth asks for surrender. Think about this. How many times did you pray for change, but secretly hope everything stayed comfortable? How many times did you ask for elevation while wanting to keep every old pattern? How many times did you ask for a new season while still trying to preserve the old one? Breakthrough interrupts. It rearranges, it exposes, it asks difficult questions. Who are you without external validation? Who are you when nobody notices? Who are you when results are delayed? Who are you when the thing you depended on no longer works? Who are you when certainty disappears? Those questions reveal hidden foundations. Because many times, we do not discover what we truly trust until everything else becomes unstable. Chosen one. This season may not be punishment. It may be separation. Not separation from people, but separation from old versions of yourself. The version that believed worth had to be earned. The version that feared disappointing everyone. The version that stayed small to remain accepted. The version that confused survival with living. That version survived. That version carried pain. That version learned difficult lessons. That version got you here. Honor that version. Respect what it endured. But do not live there forever. Because breakthrough asks for movement, and movement requires trust, not certainty. Trust. Trust that losing what no longer fits is not failure. Trust that closed doors are not always rejection. Trust that confusion is not always misdirection. Trust that the things leaving your life may be making room for what belongs. Many people wait until fear disappears. But transformation usually begins while fear still exists. You move anyway. You believe anyway. You continue anyway. And something powerful starts happening. Not all at once, but quietly. You begin discovering strength you never noticed. You become less dependent on outcomes. You stop seeking permission. You stop chasing signs. You stop trying to control every detail. And little by little, you become stable. That is where strength appears. You discover that peace is not the absence of struggle. Peace is remaining rooted while things change. Peace is refusing to abandon yourself during uncertainty. Peace is staying open when life becomes unfamiliar. And slowly, what once felt like loss becomes freedom. You realize doors did not close to punish you. They closed because your future required different pathways. You realize people did not always leave because you were unworthy. Sometimes they left because your direction changed. You realize some dreams disappeared, not because they failed, but because they finished their purpose. Chosen one, do not mistake discomfort for destruction. Sometimes discomfort is evidence that your spirit has outgrown its old environment. Sometimes what feels like losing is actually releasing. And breakthrough begins the moment you stop trying to return. But here is what nobody expects. Once you stop trying to return, another challenge appears. Because even after your environment begins changing, there is still one place transformation must reach: inside you. And that is where the deepest battle begins. The internal war before external change. Before breakthrough becomes visible, there is usually a battle nobody sees. Not around you, inside you. A battle between who you were and who you are becoming. Part of you wants the future. Another part wants familiarity. One part wants expansion. Another wants safety. One part wants to trust. Another wants proof. One part wants to move forward. Another quietly asks, "What if I fail?" This creates confusion. You feel pulled in different directions. You become emotional, sensitive, restless. You question everything, and people around you may not understand, because external life looks normal. While internally everything is shifting. You still show up. You still smile. You still do what needs to be done. But privately, you know something is changing. You think differently. You feel differently. Things that once energized you no longer hold the same weight. Things you once ignored suddenly become important. And you cannot fully explain it because the change is happening beneath the surface. This internal war is not failure, it is transition. But transition is uncomfortable because the old version of you does not leave quietly. The old identity wants certainty. It wants predictable outcomes. It wants familiar routines. It wants guarantees. The mind seeks predictability. But breakthrough introduces uncertainty. And uncertainty reveals what has been hiding underneath. Psychologically, your identity starts reorganizing. You begin questioning the beliefs that shaped your decisions. You begin noticing where fear has been guiding your choices. You begin realizing how often you depended on approval. Spiritually, your expectations begin changing. You stop asking only for outcomes and start asking for understanding. You stop asking only for open doors and start asking for wisdom. Emotionally, old wounds surface, and that can feel overwhelming because many people think healing means forgetting. But healing often begins by remembering. You remember moments that shaped you, words that stayed with you, disappointments that made you cautious, situations that taught you to protect yourself, and suddenly, you understand that some of your reactions were never random. They were survival. But survival is not the same as freedom, and hidden wounds are not appearing to destroy you. They appear because healing has become possible. You begin noticing patterns: fear of rejection, fear of disappointment, fear of not being enough, fear of being seen, fear of starting over, fear of success, fear of losing control. These fears become louder before they lose influence, because exposure often comes before release. Chosen one, do not fear what is surfacing. Observe it, learn from it, release it, because breakthrough is not becoming someone else, it is becoming more honest. And honesty creates freedom. Freedom to stop pretending, freedom to stop performing, freedom to stop carrying identities that no longer fit. There are moments where your greatest spiritual act is not speaking louder. It is sitting quietly and asking, what am I still carrying that no longer belongs in my future? What am I protecting that I have already outgrown? What beliefs am I defending that no longer create life inside me? Those questions begin opening doors. Answers begin appearing, not all at once, but gradually. You notice yourself responding differently. You become less reactive, less desperate, less dependent on outcomes. You stop forcing, you stop performing, you stop pretending, you stop exhausting yourself trying to prove your value. And unexpectedly, peace arrives, not because everything is fixed, but because alignment has started. And alignment feels different than excitement. Excitement rises and falls. Alignment stays. Alignment feels quieter, stronger, steadier. You realize peace is not always emotional. Sometimes peace is simply no longer arguing with what you already know. The internal war loses power when you stop fighting yourself, when you stop forcing old identities to survive, when you stop demanding certainty before movement. This is where breakthrough deepens, not into performance, into truth. And truth creates stability. Chosen one, you are not becoming weaker, you are becoming real. And real transformation lasts. But here is what nobody expects. After enough internal change, something subtle begins happening. You start noticing things differently. You stop chasing what once consumed you. You stop needing what once controlled you. Your desires shift. Your perspective changes. And these quiet changes, they are not random. They are often the hidden signs that your breakthrough is closer than you think. Chosen one, there are signs nobody recognizes. Not because they are invisible, but because they look ordinary. People expect breakthrough to announce itself with dramatic change. They expect immediate results. They expect open doors, big moments, clear confirmation. But many times, breakthrough begins quietly, so quietly, that people mistake it for confusion or distance or emotional exhaustion. But what if what feels unfamiliar is actually evidence that something inside you has already started changing? One sign is losing interest in things that once controlled you. The things that once demanded all your attention no longer carry the same power. You notice yourself stepping back naturally, not through force, not through pressure, but because something inside you no longer needs them. Another sign is feeling uncomfortable in spaces you once loved, places, habits, conversations, patterns, even environments that once felt normal, begin feeling smaller. And this can feel confusing, because you start questioning yourself. You wonder, why doesn't this feel the same anymore? Why do I suddenly feel disconnected? But growth changes your relationship with familiar things, not because those things are always wrong, but because they may no longer fit who you are becoming. Another sign is becoming more protective of your energy, not because you became cold, not because you became distant, but because you started understanding the value of your attention. You become more intentional. You stop giving access to everything. You stop saying yes automatically. You stop carrying emotions that were never yours. You stop exhausting yourself trying to rescue every situation. And at first, this can feel uncomfortable, because old versions of you may have confused self-sacrifice with purpose. But breakthrough teaches discernment. You think something is wrong, but often your spirit is becoming selective. You begin wanting depth over noise, purpose over attention, meaning over appearances, truth over performance, peace over proving. You stop explaining yourself, you stop competing, you stop forcing people to understand, you stop defending every decision, you stop needing everyone to agree. And strangely, peace increases, not because life became easier, but because you stopped creating resistance against what is changing. Breakthrough changes appetite before it changes circumstances. Your desires begin changing. You start wanting what grows you, not what distracts you. You begin protecting your peace. You begin choosing slower over louder. You begin choosing substance over urgency. You begin asking different questions, not, how do I get there faster? But, who am I becoming while I wait? And that question changes everything. You become patient. You become observant. You become harder to manipulate. You become less reactive, less available for chaos, less impressed by appearances. And this feels unfamiliar. Because old identity depended on reaction. New identity depends on alignment. Old identity needed immediate answers. New identity trusts process. Old identity chased approval. New identity values peace. And this shift can feel strange, because externally, nothing dramatic may have happened, but internally, everything is becoming different. Chosen one, if you feel detached from what once defined you, do not panic. Something new may already be forming. Do not rush to fill the silence. Do not return to old patterns simply because they are familiar. Do not assume discomfort means something is wrong. Sometimes discomfort means your future has become too large for your old identity. Breakthrough often announces itself quietly, not with excitement, but with clarity. And clarity changes everything. Suddenly, you know what no longer belongs. You know what deserves your energy. You know what matters. But here's where many people become discouraged. Because after clarity arrives, results do not always appear immediately. You begin seeing differently, yet circumstances may still look unchanged. And this creates another question. If breakthrough is really close, why does it still feel delayed? And that is the next truth nobody talks about. Why delay does not mean denial. Chosen one, timing can feel confusing. You thought it would happen sooner. You prepared. You believed. You waited. You stayed faithful. You kept showing up. You kept hoping. And still nothing. At least nothing visible. No clear breakthrough. No dramatic opening. No obvious answer. And that silence creates questions. Questions nobody talks about. You start wondering, did I miss something? Did I wait too long? Did I misunderstand the direction? Why does it seem like everyone else is moving while I remain here? And if enough time passes, delay starts feeling personal. You stop seeing time as a process and start seeing it as rejection. But delay is not always resistance. Sometimes delay is development. Because not every closed season is opposition. Some seasons are construction. Some seasons are strengthening. Some seasons exist to build what cannot be rushed. Because what arrives too early can become difficult to sustain. A blessing without capacity becomes pressure. Opportunity without wisdom becomes confusion. Growth without foundation becomes instability. Character matters, capacity matters, wisdom matters. And these things rarely develop in moments of arrival. They are usually built in moments of waiting. That is why preparation can feel invisible. Nobody sees discipline forming. Nobody sees patience growing. Nobody sees emotional maturity expanding. Nobody sees your perspective changing. But those hidden developments matter. Because there are things your future needs from you that your current version is still learning. Learning how to remain steady. Learning how not to abandon yourself. Learning how to lead without fear. Learning how to trust without controlling. Learning how to receive without self-sabotage. That is not failure. That is preparation. Chosen one. Many people want breakthrough, but few people want the process that makes breakthrough sustainable. Because process feels slow, process feels repetitive, process feels unnoticed, but process creates depth, and depth allows growth to remain. Think about your own life. There are things you understand now that you could not have understood earlier. There are conversations you can handle now that once would have overwhelmed you. There are decisions you can make now that your previous self would have avoided. You may not notice it, but the waiting changed you. And sometimes, that change was the answer. Trust the process without worshiping the timeline. Because timelines create pressure, and pressure makes people rush. But breakthrough does not disappear because time passed. It develops, quietly, faithfully, even when you cannot measure it, even when it feels hidden, even when nothing seems to move. Seeds do not become visible immediately. Yet growth is still happening. Roots still expand. Strength still develops. Foundations still deepen. And one day, What seemed delayed suddenly makes sense. You realize, if it happened earlier, you would not have become this person. You realize some doors had to stay closed until you stopped needing them for identity. You realize some answers arrived late because earlier versions of you would not have recognized them. You realize some waiting seasons protected you, not punished you, and unexpectedly, gratitude appears. Not because the waiting was easy, but because now you understand what it created. Chosen one, you are not behind, you are becoming ready. And readiness is not always obvious. Sometimes readiness appears quietly. You notice your reactions changing, your decisions changing, your expectations changing. You become calmer, more grounded, less desperate. You stop forcing, you stop counting days, you stop asking when every moment, and something begins happening. Not all at once, not dramatically, but subtly. The pressure begins lifting, your perspective shifts, your energy changes, your spirit becomes lighter, and before you even realize it, the season you thought would never end begins moving. Because there comes a moment after the silence, after the loss, after the internal battle, after the waiting, when everything begins to shift. Breakthrough rarely arrives dramatically. It arrives through decisions, small ones, repeated ones, quiet ones, the kind nobody applauds, the kind nobody notices, the kind that seem too ordinary to matter, until one day you realize they changed everything. You choose to believe again, not because certainty arrived, but because hope refused to disappear. You choose discipline, not because motivation stayed, but because commitment became stronger than emotion. You choose rest, not because everything is finished, but because exhaustion is not the same as progress. You choose forgiveness, not because people earned it, but because your future deserves your freedom. You choose to continue, not because it became easy, but because something inside you refuses to stop. And eventually, those choices become momentum, not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually. One quiet decision becomes another. One day becomes another. One small act becomes a pattern, and patterns begin shaping identity. Then something changes. Not outside first, inside. You wake up one day and realize you are not thinking the same way. The situation may still look familiar, but you are different. The same challenge no longer controls your emotions. The same uncertainty no longer steals your peace. The same delay no longer convinces you to quit. And you realize something shifted. You stop begging for signs. Because you stop needing constant reassurance. You stop chasing confirmation. Because your confidence becomes quieter. You stop asking if you are ready. Because you begin moving anyway, you become the evidence, not because you became perfect, but because your consistency became stronger than your fear. Your energy changes, people feel it, your perspective changes, you stop seeing obstacles as final, your peace becomes stronger than circumstances. You stop depending on outcomes to feel stable. You become less reactive, less rushed, less afraid. And strangely, life begins responding differently, not because the world changed overnight, but because your relationship with it changed. People notice. They notice you are calmer. They notice you do not react the same. They notice you carry less urgency. But what they cannot see is the invisible rebuilding that created this version of you. And you notice too. You notice you recover faster. You notice disappointment no longer destroys you. You notice uncertainty no longer defines you. You notice silence no longer scares you. And what once felt impossible suddenly feels available, not because every answer arrived, but because you finally believe you can carry what comes next. This is not magic. This is alignment. This is what happens when your internal world finally begins matching what you have been praying for. You stop forcing timing. You stop controlling outcomes. You stop living from fear. And suddenly, doors do not feel impossible anymore. Opportunities do not feel threatening. Change no longer feels dangerous. Because breakthrough is not only receiving something new, it is becoming someone who can sustain it. Chosen one, your breakthrough was never only about changing your life. It was about transforming the person living it. And this is the part people rarely talk about, because many people imagine breakthrough as the finish line, the moment, the arrival, the reward. But when it finally comes, you discover something unexpected. The breakthrough itself was never the final revelation. What comes after it changes everything. And that is what no one tells you after breakthrough arrives. Chosen one, here is the final revelation. Breakthrough is not the end. It is the beginning. Because the real reward was never only the outcome. It was who you became. You became more patient, more grounded, more aware, more connected. You discovered strength you did not know existed. And suddenly, you understand. Nothing was wasted. Not the waiting, not the tears, not the confusion, not the quiet seasons. Everything became part of the transformation. The moments that made no sense, the prayers that seemed unanswered, the delays, the endings, the uncertainty, the rebuilding. None of it disappeared. None of it was meaningless. It all became part of who you are now. And maybe that is the part nobody expects. You spend so much time waiting for life to change that one day you realize you changed. You expected breakthrough to feel like arrival, but it feels more like awakening. Not an explosion, not a dramatic moment, but recognition. You recognize your strength, you recognize your peace, you recognize your growth, you recognize that the person who started this journey is not the same person standing here now. You stop chasing, you start building, you stop surviving, you start becoming, you stop asking, when will my life begin? And you start realizing it already has. And this is why nobody can explain your growth. Because they only saw moments. They did not see the invisible rebuilding. They did not see the quiet decisions. They did not see the nights you stayed hopeful. They did not see the internal battles. They only saw the outcome. But you live the process. Chosen one. If you are in the silent season, stay open. If you are in the difficult season, stay rooted. If you are in the waiting season, stay faithful. If you are in the rebuilding season, stay present. Because spiritual breakthrough does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it arrives as a new mind, a softer heart, a clearer vision, a stronger spirit, a quieter confidence, a deeper trust. And one day you will look back and realize the breakthrough began long before you recognized it. You were not forgotten. You were being formed. This season was never breaking you. It was introducing you to who you were becoming. And if this message found you at the exact moment you needed it, do not let this be the end of the journey. But if you're still hungry for more chapters of this journey, or visual concepts, or cinematic scenes, or thumbnails that bring these revelations to life, leave these words in the comments. I will not quit in the silent season. Not as a promise to me, but as a commitment to your own transformation. And I'll know you're still walking this journey.